In this lesson here today, we're going to talk about frequency tables and histograms. Okay, let's go ahead and look at this first example of a frequency table and histogram. And the first thing to really know about these two types of graphs are that they work together. Okay, the following are low temperatures recorded in Fairfax, Virginia during the winter of 2018. This list shows the temperatures in degrees Celsius. Okay, here is my data set and all of my degrees. I am first going to use this data set to create a frequency table. All right, let's take a look at the frequency table below. You can see that the first column in my frequency table is the interval. A frequency table is always broken up into equal sections of intervals. You can see that I have 7 and 8, 9 and 10, 11 and 12, 13 and 14. Each of my intervals has two numbers within it. Sometimes it might have 3 or 4 or 10. It doesn't really matter as long as each interval has an equal amount of numbers. So what we want to do is we want to calculate the frequency of the numbers. So let's look at the first interval. We're going to focus on 7 and 8. Let's go ahead and look up at the top and see how many of these degrees are 7 or 8. So I can see that I have 1, 8, and that's it. So what I'm going to do in the column that says frequency is I'm going to write a 1. Okay? And cumulative frequency, I'm also going to write a 1. Now I'm going to explain cumulative frequency on the next one. Okay. Now let's go ahead and I'm going to erase this up here. Let's go ahead and calculate, determine how many numbers are between the interval 9 and 10. So it looks like I have 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to say that my frequency is 3. Now my cumulative frequency, we know that the word cumulative means that we're not only taking the number that we have now, but we're adding the previous numbers to it. The best example is if I said this course is cumulative. Well, that means that the test at the end of the course is going to cover all of the material throughout the year. So what we're going to do is we're going to add the 1 and we're going to add the 3 together to give us a 4. Okay, now let's go ahead and get the next part of the frequency table. Our interval in the next one is going to be 11 and 12. So let's go see how many 11s and 12s there are. I have 1, I have 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so I have 4 this time. So I'm going to go ahead in my frequency table and I'm going to say, okay, these numbers appear 4 times. My cumulative frequency, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 4, I'm going to add 4. Sometimes I like to work like this. This is a nice little visual for you. I like to take the 1 and I like to add the 3 to it to get me the 4. Then I take the 4 and I add the 4 to it to give me the, you got it, 8. Okay, my last one. My interval is going to be 13 and 14. So let's see how many there are. I have a 14 and I have a 13. So I have 2. So I'm going to go ahead and write a 2 as my frequency. And my cumulative frequency is going to be that 8 plus that 2, which is going to give me a 10. And I'm done with my frequency table. Now, you don't actually need those arrows in your frequency table. It's just kind of helpful sometimes, but this is all you really need. Okay. Sometimes in a frequency table, you're actually given another column, and usually the column is right between here, the interval and the frequency. And the word that's there says tally, which means that you can use little tally marks, such as the examples that I'm showing you here, to count up how many of each of the data points that you have for each interval. So sometimes that's there as a nice helpful resource for you. All right, now we're going to use our frequency table to create this thing called a histogram. So I have the histogram set up for us already, so let's go ahead and discuss the features. So the first thing you'll notice is that the histogram has a title up at the top. It's always going to have a title. It's also going to have axis labels, meaning my x-axis represents the temperature in degrees Celsius, while the y-axis represents the number of days. So you always want to start off your histogram by labeling the title and then the axes. I usually then like to go to my x-axis, which is the one at the bottom. This is where you're going to be putting your intervals. So I'm going to take my intervals directly off of my frequency table and place them onto my histogram just like this. And then the numbers that are going up on the y-axis are actually going to be numbers that I have to actually discover. So if we look at our frequencies, we can see that they're almost like 1 to 5. They're really 1 to 4, but what I did was I just said that my y-axis was going to be labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 5. So let me show you how this works. All right, let's look at the interval 7 and 8. We said that we had a frequency of 1. Therefore, I'm going to create this little bar that looks just like this. And that is going to be my bar that's going to represent the intervals 7 and 8 and has a frequency of 1. Then I'm going to move to 9 and 10. 9 and 10 has 3, so I'm going to go up all the way to 3. I'm going to draw my bar. And I'm going to draw him down, trying to draw it as straight as possible. You'll notice that my bars connect. A histogram always has bars that connect. Okay, 11 and 12 is going to go up to 4. So I'm going to go all the way up to 4 here. Try to draw it as straight as I can. And there we go. And then 13 and 14, that interval is going to go up to 2. So it's just going to go to about right here. So it kind of looks like a bar graph. The biggest difference is that it does not have spaces in between. And so now this histogram that we have here represents the frequency table that we have to the left. Okay, let's try a couple more examples. Okay, this time we're going to be looking at a stem and leaf plot. So the first example, we were just looking at a set of data points. Now we're looking at data points that are represented in a stem and leaf plot. So just a little refresher of a stem and leaf plot. Looking at the example we have here, we always have this thing called the stem, and then we have the leaves that are usually the ones with more numbers. Then we have this thing called a key. The key is kind of, it tells you how to read the stem and leaf plot. So you can see that when I have a 6 and then a line 1, that just means 61 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. So let's look at this example. The following stem and leaf plot represents the high temperatures recorded in Fairfax, Virginia during the spring of 2018. Okay, so what we want to do here is we want to figure out how many digits are between the interval 60 to 64. That's our first goal. So you can see here, if we look up at our stem and leaf plot, I'm going to go ahead and circle the ones that are between 60 and 64. So this would represent 62. 64, and if I circle the next one, that would be 65, and that would be in the next interval. So I only have 2 that are in this interval. So I'm going to say that my frequency is 2, and my cumulative frequency is also 2. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and erase this. My next interval that I'm given is 65 to 69. So I have 65, and then 67, 67, 67, 68, 68, and I don't have any 69s, but I do have a 70, but 70 is too much. So this is all that's going to be within this interval. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 is my frequency in that interval. And if I do my cumulative frequency, if I add this, 2 plus 6 is going to give me 8. All right, let's go to the next interval now. 70 to 74. So my stem is 7, so that means my leaf here is 0 is 70, and then I have another 70, and then I have 71, 71, 74, 74, and that's it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, another 6. Alrighty. That is going to give us a cumulative frequency of 14. All right, moving to our next interval. My next interval is 75 to 79. So 75, I have 1. Oh, let me grab my pen. 75, 75, 77, 78, and that's it. So I have 4 in this one, which gives me a cumulative frequency of 18. Alrighty, and the last one that we have here, I can see that my interval is going to be 80 to 84. So that's going to be 1 and 2. There's going to be 2 in frequencies here. And that gives me my cumulative frequency of 20. Okay, now that we've created our frequency table, let's go ahead and construct our histogram. Let me grab my pen. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to give our histogram a name. We're going to say that this is going to be the high temperatures this time. So let's go ahead and give him a name. Okay, then I'm going to jump down. I'm going to jump down here to the x-axis, and I'm going to go ahead and give this guy a name. And this is going to be, we'll say, temperatures, and this is going to be degrees Fahrenheit. And then I'm going to go up to my y-axis, and I'm also going to give that a name as well. And we'll say, we'll just say number of days. Sometimes you might even just see the word, we'll write it here, frequency, up the y-axis, and that's perfectly fine as well. Okay, now back to the x-axis. I'm just going to go ahead and write my intervals in. So I'm going to say 60 to 64, 65 to 69, 70 to 74, 75 to 79, 80 to 84. Again, just as a reminder, your intervals have equal amounts of numbers in between. So in our case, we have 4 digits within each interval. Okay, and now the y-axis. Now, if we look at our frequencies, we can see that we go from 2 all the way to 6. So we want to make our range probably 2 to 6 or 1 to 6. So I'm just going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 6. All right, let's go ahead and plot our histogram now. So the frequency of, remember, we're always plotting the frequency. The frequency of our first interval is 2, so I'm going to go ahead and draw that. Nice little bar. The frequency of the second interval is 6, so I'm going to take this actually all the way up to the top. I'm trying to draw this as straight as I can for you. Sorry, I'm a little off there. The third interval is up at 6 as well. The fourth interval is going to be at 4. And the last interval is back down to 2. So there we have it. There is our histogram representing our frequency table that is based off of our stem and leaf plot. Okay, now I have another representation for you. We're still going to do a frequency table and histogram, but this time we're going to be looking at the graph called a line plot. So it says the following line plot represents the number of books a group of students read during summer break. So just a little hint on how to read a line plot. So this is talking about the books read by students. Each one of these X's represents a student. And then the numbers along the bottom are going to represent the number of books that they read. All right, so now that we know that information, let's go ahead and fill out our frequency table. So we can see that our interval is 0 to 2. Okay, the first is going to be 0 to 2. That's going to represent these X's right here, which is 4. So I'm going to go ahead and write 4 there. And then my cumulative frequency, again, is 4. All right, 3 through 5, okay, that's going to represent everything that is in this location here, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's going to be 6. So cumulative frequency will be 10. Okay, then my third interval is 6 through 8, which is going to be these guys right here, which is going to be another 6, which is going to give me a cumulative frequency of 16, and then 9 through 11, these guys, which is going to be 4 again, which will take me up to 20. Okay, so let's go ahead and fill in our histogram. So I'm going to say that the title is just books read by students. Or you can even say number of books. Okay, my x-axis, that's this one down here, that's going to be, let's see, our intervals represent the books, right? So we're going to say that this is number of books. And you can say read. All right, and then on our y-axis, remember that's going to be our students. So this is going to represent our number of students. So we could say we could say students, or we could say frequency here. Okay, I'm going to go put my intervals in now. So I have 0 to 2 books. I have 3 to 5 books, 6 to 8 books, and then 9 through 11 books. And it looks like my students range from 4 and 6, and that's all. So I'm just going to go ahead and label this 1 to 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So the number of students that read 0 to 2 books is going to be 4. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my bar. 3 to 5 is going to be all the way up to 6. 6 to 8 is going to be another 6. And then 9 to 11, that's going to be back down to 4. Sorry, my bars are a little bit off, but that's going to be my histogram for this line plot. Okay, I think I have one more here for you. And this time is a little bit different because I am going now from a histogram over to a frequency table. So I'm going to kind of read it backwards. So it says the histogram represents student math test scores. And so out of 100 points. So here's my histogram. You can see that I have a title that says math quiz scores, or test scores in our case. And you can see at the bottom we have our intervals. And then on the side with the y-axis we have the frequency of students. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take those intervals right off of my histogram and I'm going to plug them right into my frequency table. So I'm going to write 61 to 70, 71 to 80, 81 to 90, and 91 to 100. I got that right off of my x-axis. Okay, now let's go ahead and see the frequency. Let's look at 61 to 70 first. That's going to be our purple bar. You can see that the frequency of students is going to be a 2. So I'm going to write a 2 there, and I'm going to fill in my cumulative frequency while I'm there. 71 to 80, you can see that the bar actually goes about halfway between the 4 and the 6, which means that it's going to land on 5. So my frequency is 5. So 2 plus 5 is going to give me 7. Okay, my green bar looks like it's at an 8, so I'm going to go ahead and put an 8 there, and 8 plus 7 is going to give us 15. And then the last one, the yellow one, you can see the bar is all the way up to 4, so that's my frequency. And then 15 plus 4 is going to give us 19 as my cumulative frequency. And that's it. That's how you read a histogram and put it onto a frequency table. I usually think that's a little bit easier to go from a histogram to a frequency table because you're not constructing the histogram. So as you try constructing some of these histograms, try to use a ruler to make those bars very straight. I know I couldn't do that necessarily on this video, but you can do that in your homework assignment tonight. So that's all we have for frequency tables and histograms.